Recorded Books presents Bloodstorm by Matt Braun, narrated by Brian Hutchison. Chapter 1. The three men reined their horses to a halt. High overhead, the sun beat down with a brassy glare. The landscape was barren, with windswept boulders dotted randomly among stunted trees. Westward, the Sang de Cristo Mountains stood framed against a cloudless sky. Ahead, the terrain sloped sharply upward. The men dismounted, and one of them remained behind with the horses. Then, without a word, the other two pulled Winchester carbines from their saddle scabbards. The larger man was swarthy, with hawk-like features and a droopy mustache. His companion was also dark-skinned, but clean-shaven, and somewhat less formidable in appearance. Their spurs jangled in the morning stillness as they walked forward. The slope ended abruptly on a rocky escarpment. Some distance below was a narrow canyon, bisected by a small stream and a worn trail. The terrain rose steeply on the opposite side, sheltering the canyon north and south with sheer palisades. Only the faint gurgle of the stream broke the silence, and nothing moved. There was a foreboding sense of quiet, with time and motion stilled in a frozen tableau. The men stood there a moment, staring down. Finally, the larger one motioned to a craggy outcrop. His manner had about it an air of authority, and the second man moved as though on command. They seated themselves behind jagged boulders and dropped their sombreros on the ground. From his shirt pocket, the clean-shaven one pulled out cigarette papers and tobacco. The leader hissed a sharp warning and shook his head. With a weak smile, the man stuffed the makings back into his pocket. They settled down to wait. An hour or so later, the men suddenly tensed, their eyes alert. The sound of hoofbeats, growing steadily louder, echoed off the canyon walls. A rider appeared only a short distance downstream, his horse now held to a walk as the grade steepened westward toward the mountains. The men scrambled to their feet, staring intently into the gorge below. A moment passed, while the larger one studied the rider with a look of watchful concentration. Then, as though in silent affirmation, he nodded to his companion. They shouldered their carbines, sighting on the rider. Their shots cracked almost in unison. The rider seemed to jerk upright in the saddle, twin puffs of dust spurting from his broadcloth coat. Like a prolonged drum roll, the sound of gunfire reverberated endlessly across the rocky corridor. An instant later, the rider toppled out of the saddle, and his horse bolted, clattering away upstream. He hit the ground with a muffled thud, arms splayed outward. A shaft of sunlight reflected off what appeared to be the starched brilliance of a minister's dog collar. The darkish vermilion of blood slowly stained his shirt front. Grinning, the leader barked a command in guttural Spanish. The other man left his carbine behind and gingerly made his way down the face of the outcrop. On the canyon floor, he crossed the stream and knelt beside the body. He took the dead man's wallet, which contained less than $20 in greenbacks, and a cheap pocket watch. As a final touch, he turned the dead man's coat and trousers pockets inside out. Then he rose and hurried back across the stream. On the top of the escarpment, he obediently handed over the wallet and pocket watch. The larger man examined the watch with a cautious expression, then he tossed it into the rocks. His mustache lifted in a sardonic smile as he thumbed through the wallet. He laughed and walked off toward the horses. "Vamos. Hemos acabado el trabajo." Chapter 2. Braddock scanned the letter. So far, he'd answered none of today's correspondence. The letter in hand, which was from a Midwestern bank, was no exception. He dropped it into the wastebasket. There was a light rap, and the door to his...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.